Welcome to the Week 8, if you're on the NFL calendar, episode of Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. I am Tim Graham of The Athletic, here with Matthew Fairburn of The Athletic and Jonah Bronstein of Bronstein Amalgamated. And a full week of sports, even though it feels kind of hollow. We're down to only football. After the World Series ended and the NBA is over and the NHL isn't going to be back for another couple of months. And well, I mean, it's all right to be stuck with football. It's a fun game to be stuck with, but
we have the biggest sport of them all going for another 4 or 5 days.
What's that?
Political football.
Oh, the political football. Yeah, that's true. In fact, I received some email correspondence about some lines, some betting that you can do on the election. Although I don't know if I want to wager on something that is so heavy, you know?
Yeah, it's a little morbid to be. I don't know. It's too much for me. I don't know if I could. I'm emotionally invested enough as it is.
Well, maybe you can hedge your bet. So whatever you want to happen, you bet against, and then you win either way.
Yeah, if one guy wins, my 401k will go in the tank. But if the other guy wins, I'll win a big bet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
or at least that's the line of thinking, right? I think the 401k is going in the tank no matter what.
That's the advice from CTBK CPAs, right?
That's right. You know what?
Maybe I shouldn't say that.
Maybe we should get Gene Kirshner on to talk us through that. Or Matt, your brother should come on, an actuary, and tell us what we need to do to maybe offset. How big of a wager do we need to place to offset 401k projections? And speaking of actuaries, also, are actuaries going to be baseball managers moving forward? Because that seemed to be Tampa Bay's approach to Game 6 of the World Series. Not just Game 6, but all their postseason. Now, the Chicago White Sox have a different philosophy. Remember when Tony La Russa was considered the big egghead in baseball? With all his different things that he used to do that was considered avant-garde or by the numbers, and you know, all these weird things like batting pitchers 8th and Mark McGwire moving him up in the order and doing all kinds of weird things. Everything's being done by the numbers now, and interesting with what happened in I was going to say in Los Angeles, but with what happened in Texas for the World Series between Tampa and the Dodgers, with Blake Snell being removed. Matt, I know you got some thoughts on it.
Well, it was pretty timely after we had talked to Sal Majorana on Monday that everything we talked about kind of just was on, full display in that World Series game. It was everything that is frustrating people about baseball. If only my brother would have known that the math nerds would be running sports. He could have taken a different career path. But yeah, I was dumbfounded that they took that guy out. I feel like at some point you have to just use some common sense and not be a slave to the numbers. But it shouldn't have been a surprise. That day he said, we're going to let this guy go through the lineup twice, and at the first sign of trouble and the third time through, we're going to pull him out of the game. And they did exactly that. It's what got them to the World Series. It's what Sal was ranting and raving about on Monday. It's where baseball is right now. It's how the game is played. It's how managers manage the game. You almost don't need a manager. You could just have somebody designated in the dugout to relay whatever the message is from the stats people, because it seems like they're really just following the numbers on all this.
Hey, Matt, do you know, because I think you followed a little bit more closely than I do, the stats about pitchers, third time through the order, how do they do against batters that have tested positive for coronavirus that morning?
That is evidently not great because
how large of a sample do we have of?
I actually went to bed after the Dodgers won because I was like, oh, great. I was waiting up to, see who would win, see a couple seconds of the celebration and, feel a little normalcy. And then I shut it off. I was like, not a bad World Series. People are going to be losing their minds about that pitching decision. I woke up the next day. Nobody's even talking about the pitching decision because everybody's freaking out about Justin Turner testing positive and being out there. And what a bad look all around. Baseball had the sporting world to itself, and they have this analytics nightmare, right? PR wise, right? Of people saying this game is too much run by numbers. And then there you have a potentially historic starting pitcher performance ruined by a guy just yanking him because he let up a single in the 6th inning. And then you have, a sport that already handled the virus very poorly. They have a guy test positive for the virus and then go out there and celebrate with his teammates. And apparently he was just defiant when people were like, man, you shouldn't go out there. And he was like, screw that. And he was out there anyways.
Like licking the trophy.
And people it didn't even seem like his teammates cared. They're like, get in here, kid. Like, get in this picture. Like, it's like, what is going on?
It's the yin and the yang of, I don't want to say America. I think of human existence. So you had everything by the numbers. You know exactly what we're going to do, regardless of how it looks, no gut, no nothing. And then here's a guy who should be listening to the numbers and the science and the data, and he goes against it, and it's all gut. It's F you, security. I'm going out there, get out of my way. And his buddies hugging him because they don't care. They're in the moment. It's all about being in the moment. If the Rays had been in the moment a little bit more, Blake Snell might, have pitched a complete game.
Do you think those Dodgers players, how many of them do you think realized that he had tested positive? You're in the middle of a game. He gets pulled out. Maybe it was like.
I'm guessing in the dugout. I mean, word has to spread. Why isn't Turner in the game? You'd have a revolt of one of your best players being taken out of the lineup in a very important game.
I don't know how often he gets pulled though. Like they make so many lineup changes.
It was early.
It wasn't like the 7th inning that he got pulled?
That's kind of early, especially
that could be a pinch runner or a fielder or whatever. I don't know. They do so much moving and shaking in those baseball lineups over the course of a game that, like Austin Meadows got pulled out of that game, for who I thought was one of the Rays' better hitters. And, he gets pulled out because it was a better matchup. So it's possible that some of those guys in the dugout were just like, we just got a better fielder in there. And then they're out there, or they forgot, or I don't know. But some guys didn't seem too bothered by the fact that this guy was out there occasionally without his mask. He had it on sometimes, but not other times.
I think you're in the moment. You don't care. So what if I get coronavirus now? The season's over. We just did it. This is my brother. He is an important part of our team. He's got to be in this team photo. All those things are into it. That's the meathead male, aspect of it. I mean, I'm not looking down on it. Well, I am looking down on it, but I'm not saying I wouldn't. Maybe I'd do the same thing. Maybe I'd be like, I'd be so into it. Think of all the guys that are probably thinking, I don't care if I die tomorrow I won the World Series. My dad got to watch me win the World Series, or, I'm set for life. I can sign WS Champs 2020 on every autograph from now on. I'm not going to have to buy a beer in Los Angeles, and there's the whole LA Dodgers aspect of it too, not having won a World Series since 89 or 88 or 88, right? So there's how big baseball is in Los Angeles and just this larger than life. I think there's a lot of them didn't care because, and I think we see a lot, it's what you see with CTE and all these other things, especially in the moment. People would say, all right, you have to have coronavirus as soon as the season's over, but you get to win the World Series. I think we would be stunned at the percentage of Dodgers or any baseball team that would say, yes, yeah, I'm fine with that.
You're probably right. You probably are. And I just wonder how many of those guys realized what they were doing in the moment. And hey, maybe it is exactly what you're talking about. And they just said, yeah, screw it. This is, I think there's probably a big part of it that, hey, the season's over. If it was game whatever, there was game 7 the next day, they had just forced a game 7. They would have said, hey man, get out of here. We need we can't have another positive before tomorrow. Now they're like, who cares? Like,
yeah, I better not see you back at the hotel.
Right. Now they're like, whatever. They won. It's a bad look. But it shouldn't be surprising knowing what we know about athletes.
So let's merge coronavirus and baseball back in Buffalo, where the Toronto Blue Jays started things off. And, once they left Buffalo, or once they got into the postseason, things didn't go so well for them. But what about Buffalo being some sort of sports haven for Toronto sports teams that are not allowed to compete in their country because of crossing back and forth over the border, what have you? We're seeing some chatter in Buffalo, mostly from politicians. New York State Senator Tim Kennedy wrote an open letter to Adam Silver and Raptors GM Masai Ujiri saying, come play in Buffalo. The Buffalo Common Council had some sort of public statement. Yes, please, Toronto Raptors, come and play your games here because of the success of the Blue Jays experience throughout the summer. I reached out to an executive with Pagula Sports and Entertainment today who tells me that no one has reached out to them about this, and it would have to have the Pagula's blessing for this to take place because it would need to be in their facilities. Also, they have a hockey tenant. The Sabres need to take priority over everything. So anyways, I just wanted to ask you guys, Jonah, I'll start with you. Your thoughts on the Raptors possibly playing in Buffalo, or maybe not. Maybe it doesn't seem possible, and by that time, maybe fans are allowed. So maybe this is a little different than the Blue Jays where nobody got to see them. Maybe Western New Yorkers can see these games.
Well, as much as I think it would be great, and I think everybody that could potentially be involved, the politicians, the people that run the arena, ownership, should be in favor of it and maybe explore the option. I don't expect it to happen. I'd really be surprised if it did happen. I think there's a lot of reasons. You mentioned maybe the big one is that the Sabres are a tenant. The NHL might possibly, there's been some talk that they would be doing a hub in Buffalo. And if that were the case, then there really wouldn't be any sort of availability for another tenant at that time. And I don't think there's any certainty from what I've seen or heard that the Raptors are looking for a new home right now. Really, the NBA doesn't quite know when it's going to start and whether they're going to have fans in the stands or not, whether they're going to also do some sort of hub scenario. And it hasn't been determined yet, as it was in the summer with the Blue Jays, that Canada won't allow the Raptors to play at home. And maybe they've learned things from having the NHL in Toronto over the summer. Maybe there's differences with the NBA's protocol than the MLB's protocols were that make the Canadian government more willing to let the Raptors play at home. Another issue with the potential of the Raptors playing in Buffalo is that I don't know where they practice. I don't think, especially with the Sabres using that arena, that they could practice in the arena regularly. And I don't know if now you're talking about multiple locations. There's better, I wouldn't say better, but there's probably cleaner fits for the Raptors if they're looking for another city to house them, maybe Kansas City, or splitting an arena with another NBA team, which would reduce travel overall. I just don't see it happening. It would be great, and hopefully maybe there is a day when the Raptors could play a preseason game. I think it's something that should be explored in the future, but I don't expect it to happen with this coming NBA season in Buffalo.
What's the deal with Kansas City? Is it because it's not a hockey city that they wouldn't have to worry about the NHL aspect of it?
Kansas City has a NBA caliber arena that's empty right now. They don't have concerts. They don't have hockey. I mean, there might be a stray thing going on, but they really could give that whole arena. I don't know if they have a practice facility, but they probably do have a better situation of just giving the facility over to the Toronto Raptors to use while they're in town. That wouldn't really be the case in Buffalo, especially if there's multiple NHL teams in Buffalo at that time.
It feels like not as clean as the Blue Jays to Buffalo fit, because it's not, that was same organization, number one. That's your AAA affiliate. But it was also such a tight turnaround where it was like all of a sudden the season was starting and Canada was like, yeah, you can't play here. And they had a short period of time to figure something out. So it made sense to go with something that was easy. They had their
and it was
AAA
out of
team here.
desperation because of all
It was out of desperation as well.
They were stuck.
They exhausted as many options as they could, but didn't have that much time to exhaust a lot of options. So the Raptors are not desperate. They have a lot of time to figure this out. And as Jonah pointed out, they have options like Kansas City or another NBA city, and they have a lot more time to negotiate those things and say, okay, Kansas City's not going to work. Let's try, Boston. Let's try New York City. Let's try whatever, different options they run through before they would get to Buffalo, which doesn't seem ideal from a basketball standpoint and doesn't seem like the most natural fit. It would be awesome, especially if they could have fans. It's a great team, and a sport I know a lot of people in Western New York love. It just seems like a little bit of a pipe dream. I think maybe the better thing to cross your fingers for is an NHL hub, because that seems like the higher probability.
And, that leads me to what I've been meaning to say since we started the show. And whether you're in this bind where you have to find a place right away or you have more time like the Raptors have, if you are a business or starting a business, don't forget to reach out to Shampoo, Travis, Besaw, and Kirshner, CPAs and business consultants. It's an accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client for assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on acquisitions and mergers. CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. Shampoo, Travis, Besaw, and Kirshner. That's CTBK. Over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. So I'm sure they're available if the Raptors need them.
Yeah, I think it would be a good way for them to merge with. You could have Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. That's who owns the Raptors, right? Merging with Pagula Sports and Entertainment.
Sure.
I think CTBK should broker it. They should be on the phone.
I don't know if the NFL would like that too much.
Gene Kirshner played a little college basketball, so maybe if the Raptors need a 12th man off the bench to make some threes, maybe he could fill in that fashion as well.
I think he was on the call list for the Bills last week to play tight end, along with our UB friend Matt Weiser. He was around town. He could have filled in a little bit. And we're going to talk some UB football later on in the show. But first, Gerald Dixon is back, and a great discussion ahead regarding defensive back play in the NFL today, but really with the focus on lockdown corners and whether or not that's a myth. Do lockdown corners still exist in the NFL with the way the game's played today? If they do exist, then two of them are going to be on the field in Orchard Park, Tre'Davious White and Stephon Gilmore, both of them Bills draft picks. So a good time to talk about cornerback play in the NFL and what Gerald Dixon, a former cornerback, 4-year starter at Alabama, all SEC his senior year, by the way, and he also coached the position in college. He's going to tell us what he thinks. And also later in the show, of course, Joel Staniszewski on the line from Vegas to give us his thoughts on this Bills point spread. It's at 3 as I speak. The total has gone from 46 down to 41, which is interesting. A lot of that due to the weather. Going to be pretty windy and looks like a lot of rain coming on Sunday. And we're going to get into that crazy spread of, depending on where you get it, 19 and a half points, opened at 21 points for the Jets at Chiefs. So all that coming up on TGAF, brought to you by CTBK. Thanks for joining us. joining us again, back by popular demand, former Bills scout Gerald Dixon. But with the topic we're going to discuss today, just calling him former Bills scout is not enough. We have to go back to this guy's playing days because we're going to talk about cornerbacks, and that's exactly the position Gerald Dixon played, and he played it well. A 4-year starter at Alabama. He was all SEC his senior year in 2002, went on and played the position a little bit in the NFL with the Scottish Claymores of NFL Europe, won a Grey Cup with the Edmonton Eskimos in 2005, and then coached cornerbacks at the Citadel for 3 seasons, I think it was. Was
Correct.
it 3 seasons?
3.
Before joining the Bills scouting department in 2014. So, Gerald Dixon, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, thanks for you guys having me back again, man. Feels good. It's like back
Right.
home.
Hey, it was very popular last time. Things went great, and we were exchanging some texts this week. And what a natural time to have you back because of some of the things we were talking about. I don't want to just give away the show based on what our texts were. We want to talk it out, but you had some really interesting thoughts on lockdown corners. And here we have 2 Bills draft picks who are considered the best lockdown corners in the NFL, if not the number 1 and number 2, top 5 for sure. And I know all this stuff's subjective and debatable, but you had some interesting thoughts on lockdown corners. And with Stephon Gilmore and Tre'Davious White on the same field Sunday when the Bills and the Patriots meet, I just thought we had to have you back to talk about this. So I guess I'll just leave it at that. Sum up why you reached out and you made a couple of comments. They were kind of like declarations, and they made me stop and think regarding the value of the finger quotes lockdown cornerback. What can you take us through that again?
Well, my opinion on it is in a time right now in the way that rules are in the NFL, it doesn't really allow guys to be locked down corners per se again in the terms of Deion Sanders and Rod Woods and Champ Bailey, because you really can't touch the guys after 5 yards, which is, it's unreal. But to say that you are a lockdown corner, the rules don't permit that. So in my opinion, they're good corners in the NFL, but the word lockdown, I would steer away from that because there truly aren't guys that are blanketing guys throughout the field and not allowing any receptions for explosive plays. Because my opinion is if you cover a guy 20 yards down the field and you get a pass interference, that's just as good as a catch, right? So even though you per se locked them down and you had a pass interference, that's still a 20-yard explosive play. So there, I don't think the rules allow it anymore.
Is there a turning point that you can kind of point to? I know the rules have kind of progressively every year, it seems like they're getting a little bit more hard for cornerbacks to have contact and do what you're talking about. But was there a moment, I guess, where it started, where it was like we had some lockdown corners? Because it doesn't seem like Darrelle Revis was still a lockdown corner, but it seems like things started to turn a little bit, and it's just kind of gone downhill because of what you're talking about with the rules.
Right. I think
let's not go all the way back to Mel Blount, the guy who, he rewrote the record book in the 70s because he would just abuse receivers all over the field. Right. He was so monstrous. There were lockdown corners, obviously, after Mel Blount, and the rules started to change with the 5-yard contact and all this other stuff. But yeah, it's all right. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
Yeah, I just think that Deion Sanders, Rod Woodson in their heyday, Darrelle Revis, Champ Bailey are the only guys that we can say are true lockdown corners that track everyone, no matter if you were in the slide outside or wherever. They followed you and they played man-to-man. And those guys, I think they had more leeway with their hand play, grabbing, clutching, pushing downfield because they worked their way to get that respect. And I think a lot of the referees didn't throw the flags. Now that the rules and everybody wants to see points get thrown on the board, as soon as you touch a guy downfield, you're going to get that penalty because it's more of an offensive league. I don't think the fans want to come out and see a game of 13-16. They would rather see 36 to 26, 40s and 30s rather than the teens of the old grab 'em, clutch 'em days that most corners got away with playing the position.
Gerald,
What do you think of?
Oh, go ahead, Matt.
What do you think of, I guess, this idea of, if we fast forward to the modern day and the value of cornerbacks? I find these two guys that we're talking about this week pretty interesting because Stephon Gilmore does play quite a bit of man coverage. Obviously, Bills fans saw a lot of him when you were here. You got very familiar with him, a guy that you could trust kind of on an island in man coverage. Tre'Davious White can play man coverage, does it well, but he also plays a lot of zone. How do you gauge the value of each individual guy and the position as a whole because of the rules that you're talking about?
So my value in a corner would be when you are on the island by yourself, what's your percentage when you're thrown against, right? And what the percentage is not allowing catches. And also on top of that, when you are thrown at, how many times you get the ball back to the offense? Because you can have a lot of corners that get PBUs, right? But after a while, PBUs run out. The whole point of playing that position and when people throw against you, is to get the ball back. So I put a lot of value in guys with ball skills, right? Because if you don't have the ball skills to get the ball back, I think you and I can go out there and just hang out and knock balls down left and right. But at some point, the offense is going to get a play to get into scoring position. So that's my deal. Now, when I look at Trey White and Steph Gilmore, I think they're not as similar as people think they are. I think they're very different in the way that they play, right? Steph Gilmore is, to me, since he's been in the NFL, one of the better corners to get his hands on people at the line of scrimmage. So his value is truly in press, man to man. When he plays off, that's when he's at his least effective, where Trey is better playing off than pressing. It's because he has better feet, better understanding, better balance, better instincts is playing off corner. So you can play more zone with Trey White than you can play with Steph. Now, Steph's getting better because he's left the Bills and he's matured more in his skill set. But to me, you have two totally different corners that are very respected, but they bring different values to that position.
Now, you were on Doug Whaley's scouting staff, and also you carried over and worked with Brandon Beane for a little bit too. So can you go back and tell us about the thought process on letting Stephon Gilmore go and the money that was spent? Because a lot of people, it's a contradiction, really. Bills fans were upset to see him go, and yet they said he isn't worth the money that the Patriots gave him. Right. So it's this weird thing. Like the Bills fans are going to be very quick to, and they have been since he left, say, you gave up. There's your lockdown corner, all pro. No way, man. Guys overrated this whole thing. And yet they were still upset to see him go. The Bills front office had to make a decision. So which is it? The fans need to decide which side they're on, I think, whether the Bills made a wise choice not to make him so highly paid or to have signed that deal and kept him around.
Right. So when you looked at Steph's career when he was here with the Buffalo Bills, often hurt, right? Production wasn't truly high, and you're on a losing team, right? So when all those things are going against you and you try to market yourself in free agency and say, you know what, I should be the highest paid corner. Well, you got to say, how good is the defense with you, and how good is the defense without you, right? And when you ran those numbers, they were pretty close to being this even, right? So you go back and say, how much do you have to pay this guy? Now, it's easier when Steph Gilmore is now in New England, and he's playing with 12, and they're winning games, and he gets an interception. And with that interception, 12 comes out there and scores a touchdown. Now, that plays looks great because they're winning games. That interception is coming back as points on the board. When he was in Buffalo, if he got an interception, it might go 3 and out. So that's not an impactful play leading to the scoreboard. So when you're in New England, it's going to look much better because you're on a better team, right? Your staff's been there for a long period of time, and you had your offense with one of the best quarterbacks that's ever played a game. You're giving the ball back to him. So everything that you do is going to be plus, be magnified to greatness. Other than when you were at Bills drive, you make a big play, the offense doesn't execute, you don't get points out of it, you lose that game. How great does that look? So when you're in free agency, you gotta have all of those situations and weigh him out and say, is he worth paying that much? Yes, he's locked down, but how much value is he going to bring back to your team?
How much of it too was what you talked about? Sean McDermott likes to play zone defense, and Tre'Davious White is probably a better corner for zone defense. Not that when the Bills let Stephon Gilmore go, they didn't know that Tre'Davious White would necessarily be the guy that they'd replace him with. But you know what scheme that Sean McDermott's bringing in. You know that there's probably a timetable to compete, and maybe this guy's not the best fit. Maybe he's not at his best when you're going to be competing. So how much of the scheme fit came into play there?
Oh, I think it came in a great deal because, again, you're going to have to pay him a lot of money. Sorry about that. You're going to have to pay him a bunch of money and not get the true value out of the player. And again, hold on 1 second.
This is very unprofessional. This is a podcast that has 2 listeners, Gerald. I think we're okay. You're on here to increase the audience. You're not. This is fine. This actually is better radio that we've had in a long time.
I apologize about that, though. But
that's just going to make Tim do some editing work.
No, why would I?
All right, so let me start back over to the zone corner spot for him. So now that you have a player such as Tre'Davious White that can play a lot of the cover 2, quarter half defense that Sean likes to play, you can get a guy in that's not so much of a man-to-man per se press corner that Steph Gilmore is, and be perfectly fine.
Where do you think that money should be spent? And I guess I'm making a leap there, Gerald, because I didn't get your opinion specifically on this. But it sounds like the phrase of lockdown corner doesn't really exist anymore. It still gets used quite a bit. Whoever the best cornerbacks in the league are going to be called the lockdown corner, right? Because it's just
they're going to have
that's little, a term that's out there.
A little lock emoji on your keyboard. They'll put it next to them on Twitter, and
right.
Whole 9 yards.
Like number 1 receiver. Like everybody thinks my team, because so and so is my best receiver, he's a number 1 receiver. No, and number 1 receiver is like a position. Right. I think lockdown corner is a position. Really, it's not just because he happens to be the best on a given team or in a conference. So, anyways. Do you think they're overpaid then? Do you think it's out of line in terms of the importance of where the money is spent on defensive positions? So
I tie it into it like this. It's like the quarterback position and the receiver position on offense. To me, if you have a pass rusher up front that can really disrupt the quarterback, you don't have to spend that much on the back end because everything's going to get sped up. So you can play more zone, right? Your man-to-man skills doesn't have to be hip pocket tight because that quarterback's going to have to throw quicker. So you have to tie both of them in. And the way that the rules are, I don't believe you need to pay quote-unquote lockdown corners low-end quarterback money to get the true value of that position.
How would you coach these guys? If you're coaching this position with all the rules these days, what would you coach them to do? How would you try to bring out that lockdown mentality in a guy that maybe is being officiated out of it at this point?
Well, a lot of it goes into like magician's eyes, right? A magician's hands. A lot of people go to these magical shows and you see the magician doing a bunch of things with his hands, right? But rarely you don't see him at all. So when you're teaching a corner how to really use his hands have to be low, right? Slap, not grab. Eyes have to be back towards the passer, because if your eyes are back towards the passer, it's less likely that that referee's going to throw that flag. So a lot of what you do is you just got to teach hands, right, at the right time, when to look back, and a lot of that's feel. So you have to practice that. You have to drill those things that you want out of the corner, because the hardest thing to do is to teach a guy to relax when the ball's in the air. When I was coaching DBs in college, and guys who go out and recruit on the road, and they'll come back and they'll sit down and they start talking about the guy and explaining who the player was and basically presenting them. The first thing I would ask them is, what does he play on offense? And if they said that he never played offense, I would say, okay, please remove that person from my desk, because if you don't feel comfortable with the ball in your hands, at some point you're going to panic when the ball's in the air. So I'd like more receivers, punt returners, if you play baseball, outfielders, just because you feel more comfortable with the ball in the air. And you see a lot of these cornerbacks get penalties because they aren't comfortable with the ball in the air and they panic. So you have to debug that and coach that out of a lot of guys to relax when the ball's in the air, because truly it's between you and the receiver. But you see a lot of guys start grabbing and clutching just because they panic and they don't feel comfortable with the ball in the air.
Let me ask you an old guy technique question, Gerald, because back when I was learning how to play defensive back in the 80s, even if you were in man-to-man coverage, it was more of a basketball mentality of, you got to keep the guy in front of you and you're looking through the receiver to the quarterback. And now, and I don't think that this is bad fundamentals. It's obviously being coached for a reason. And I've had discussions with coaches about this over the years, and I kind of know the answer, but I think there are probably a lot of people who are wondering it too. So I'd like to hear it from your words as somebody, as an expert. You see so many times the defensive back not turning his head to look around. And it's like, even if it's 30 yards downfield and it looks like the guy's lost. And I know he's being taught to read things like the hands and the eyes, but that's a cheat that can get you into some trouble. So I guess, can you explain how that changed and why that changed to where DBs are now taught to look back late instead of earlier?
Well, I'm going to tell you, bad DB coaches teach looking and playing through the hands, because if you truly play through the hands, good receiver coaches are going to teach receivers to flash your hands late. So you're not going to run with your hands straight up. You're going to run, the ball's going to come over your head, track it, catch it.
Marvin Harrison.
Right, and then you flash your hands late.
Yeah.
If I flash my hands late, the DB does not have a chance to go through my hands. And if you go through the hands, that means your eyes aren't back looking at the ball. So what I taught my DBs were, okay, once the route progressed 15 yards and deeper, and you're in phase, that means hip to hip, shoulder to shoulder, you can now turn into, right, with your head back, shoulder into the receiver, and get your eyes back to that quarterback for a quick glimpse, because the ball is coming at some point, right? But if you're just teaching the guy just to run and play and look off the receiver, good receivers aren't going to give good indicators to play the ball.
Randy Moss was one of the most amazing. You can talk about Randy Moss's ability to leap and his speed and all this stuff. But I can't remember who did the story. I'd give credit if I could. It was a television story about how he trained his eyes not to get big, because that was another key that you look for as a defensive back, is when the receiver's eyes get big, that means the ball's on its way. And it's like a telltale thing to actually train himself to not open his eyes wider when the ball was in the air, to me was just next level stuff.
Oh, no doubt about it. And, playing the position, I always felt when the ball was coming. Because it's like the whole world it goes quiet, and it's just you, and you can feel that receiver almost running and grunting. And then, like you said, the eyes get big, and bad receivers give away their indicators when the ball's coming. A lot of guys
about quiet, like the crowd, you mean, or like reading the stadium and the
whole
energy?
World goes.
Yeah,
it's quiet, and it's just you and him. and you can feel the ball coming some way, somehow.
Mhm.
Some people have it instinctually, and you feel it. And then a lot of guys, what they do, like I said, they panic, where you see them start grabbing and clutching and working into the receiver, and you see the real good ones that have ball skills: Champ Bailey's, Revis, Deion Sanders, Rod Woodson, right? Antonio Cromartie, very good ball skills. Where those guys would relax, almost come to a phase of they're the receiver, and they'll just calmly work themselves back into the receiver, elevate eyes back, and go for the ball.
A name that you mentioned in a text to me earlier this week, maybe the greatest of all time at that, Aeneas Williams.
Oh, Aeneas, just instincts out the yin-yang, but ball skills. And understood that the play's not over until the whistle's blown and the ball's on the ground. Right? So it's just really drilling that with your DBs or your cornerbacks over a period of time, so where they now are comfortable with the balls in the air. When I was coaching, I never allowed a drill without throwing the football so the corners can actually catch the ball. Because you can do as many drills as you want to with cones and lines, and you have guys looking around, checking their feet and their hips and whatever. But at the end of the day, the ball is the issue.
Sorry, Matt, I'm dominating the questions here, and I know you have some, but right on that topic, Gerald, is there a guy, maybe you coached him, hopefully it's somebody in the NFL, so the listeners will know who we're talking about here, or viewers if you're watching on YouTube. Is there a guy who was maybe just lights out at guarding, at being in your hip pocket, but just had zero ball skills? And Darrell Green?
Darrell Green.
Okay, now he was a return man though. So, but he just couldn't put it together on.
If you've seen Darrell Green in warm-ups trying to catch a football, you would think that, wow, how is he one of the better corners of all time? Just not very good ball skills, but the ability to stay in hip pocket, reaction skills, instincts went to break when he's playing off, when he's pressing, enough quickness to react and get back in phase with speed to recover. Darrell Green. But ball skills, not so much.
I'd have to go back and look. I just remember Darrell Green being future Hall of Famer, and the returns and all that stuff. But I'll have to go back and look at some clips.
Yeah, I studied D. Green, and that wasn't his best attribute was catching the football. Everything else, that's what you're looking for. But finishing plays, not so much.
As somebody who played the position, you talk about the two completely different, types of players Stephon Gilmore and Tre'Davious White are, because they're in two different schemes. Right. Is one scheme easier to play in than the other? Or one style easier to play?
It all depends on your mentality. Most guys that are press corners have somewhat of an alpha male attitude and a disregard for combat, because when you press, you're really in a boxing match, and you aren't afraid of the receiver in your personal space. Right. Most guys that like to play off and stay off, they don't like receivers in their personal space. They like to create space so they can react, play through the receiver, key on the quarterback with the ability to break and come downhill. So it's really, to me, it's more mentality and feel than actually truly skill set, if that makes any sense.
Do you think the scheme that Sean McDermott plays, I don't know, break it down for, I guess, the in layman's terms of how they play coverage, and then I guess how valuable corners are there, how interchangeable they can be, because we've seen a lot of guys come in and out here.
Right. The scheme that the Bills are using now is very cornerback friendly, right? Because you play a lot of quarter, half. That means if you slice the field up in quarters, right? One corner has one quarter of it, the other safety has the other quarter, and the corner towards the other safety has half of the field. So he's playing cover two. So cover 4 and cover 2. Quarter, half. Some people call it cover 6, right? It's friendly with the ability to play through the receiver with eyes on the quarterback. And that's why I see majority of Sean's guys get a lot of interceptions. That's why there's not a lot of value on true man-to-man lockdown skills. At times, you have to play man-to-man, and he puts those guys in situations to do so. But playing in his system, you see a lot of those corners throughout the years have a lot of success because they're not truly stressed in playing and covering man-to-man. Their stress is reading routes and attacking the passing concept that's coming towards them with the ability to finish with interceptions, less with PBUs. So it's almost kind of bend but don't break defense, but he's going to give you, Sean's defense is going to give you some throws. And when you make that mistake, his defenders and his corners make you pay for it with intercepting the ball and getting the ball back to the offense. A la the year that Josh Norman had. Josh Norman, solid skills, but ball skills and instincts. And the year that he had it before he hit free agency, that's what really broke him out.
Let's keep this an entirely defensive back centric conversation. We'll wrap it up with this. I think it's a good way because brings us back to Sunday's game. And obviously, in my estimation, I know there are a lot of people in Buffalo that just want to be a contrarian and say, no, they'll give me Newt Rockne or something. But the greatest coach of all time that the Bills are going to be going up against on Sunday. And his ability to dial up defenses specific for a situation. What have you seen in what defenses, let's keep it in the secondary, because that's what we're talking about. And I like having this very thematic show.
Right.
What are defensive backs doing to Josh Allen and Brian Dable compared to the beginning of the season? How would you draw that up on a chalkboard?
Well, watching the first few games when Josh just had incredible success, they were facing a lot of man-to-man schemes. That means guys were running with their receivers, and those throws were easier. Like Josh can see it man-to-man. You see a lot of the times that he'll move a lot of the receivers. He'll move the running back in, bring him out, bring him out, bring him in, bring him in, bring him out, with a lot of movements from the slot receiver to determine if it's going to be man-to-man or zone. In the first 4 games, they had a lot of man-to-man concepts that they ran that was pretty good because, like I said, they're seeing defensively. The last couple of games where he struggled a little bit, they were playing a lot more zone. And it's like a smoke and mirrors trick, right? So you show him something pre-snap, post-snap, you show him something totally different. So while he's getting the ball snapped to him, you'll see the 2 safeties shift out, the cornerback come down, the linebacker run the middle of the field in the cover 2, or whatever zone coverage that you're going to run at Josh. And they're taking away the explosive plays. Now, in my opinion, what Josh did in the second half last week against the Jets was he took what the defense was giving him. Same thing that he did a few times in a couple of drives versus Tennessee. So to make a long story short, not longer, as long as Josh and Brian stay patient and takes what the defense gives them in the zone, they'll be perfectly fine. But at times you see Josh is not patient, and he'll try to go for the home run hits, and he'll throw into coverage, which the offense does not dictate that throw, that play at that time. If that makes any sense.
Would it be why wouldn't a team just play zone all the time then? Why wouldn't would you expect teams to just keep playing zone? I know not every team necessarily has the personnel, but it seems like most teams can play a little of both. Would you expect teams to kind of just keep playing zone until he proves he can beat it?
Yeah, play zone and then, at times mix it up with some blitzes. But if I was coaching against him, yes, I would let him prove to me that he could make accurate throws and force the Bills offense to go 10, 12 play drives to score instead of 2-3 explosive plays. Because truly, if you saw at the beginning of the year, it was explosive plays. I don't think a lot of teams, again, you didn't have preseason, so they took time to adjust. They thought it was the same old Bills receivers. No, there's a bad man from Maryland named Steph Diggs that's out there that can mix up any defensive back in the NFL because he's an excellent route runner. And then you have smoke John Brown that can blow the top off, and then you have the sneaky Sultan of the slot, Cole Beasley can get open and find his way against man-to-man coverage, and he's so intelligent to find his own. So, long story short, early on, defensive coordinators were thinking, hey, we can play man-to-man, smother cover man-to-man, and get these guys and force Josh to throw in the tight windows. What Josh is showing people is, yeah, you can make me throw in the small windows or tight windows, but Steph Diggs is going to get open. John Brown can run by your number 2 corner. So we'll live with these matchups and be perfectly fine.
Well, Gerald, I can't thank you enough for coming back once a week. Maybe this will be a regular deal, man. I don't want to wear you out or exploit you, but this has been educational. This has been fun. You've made the show better 2 weeks in a row. People are just going to want to tune into the Gerald Dixon podcast.
No, man, don't give me that much credit. I'm just sitting here just talking ball to 2 good guys.
Well, thanks for that, and thanks again for coming on the show. And hopefully we'll have you back again soon if time allows for you and in your schedule. But you're welcome back anytime. This is a blast.
Oh, man, appreciate you guys having me. Hopefully my phone don't go off again, and one of my sisters calling me.
Hey, that's all right. It's No Frills Radio. My dog can start barking at any time. It's happened. Today's my daughter's birthday. She's got a friend over. I thought it might have been more than. Oh, there's my dog right there, right on cue. I thought we were going to have 12-year-old girls yelling and screaming upstairs. We dodged that bullet, but anything can happen. Or a ringing phone. That means you're busy. That means people want to talk to you. That's a good.
No,
sign.
I got 5 sisters, and they like to talk to their young brother.
That's good. Right on, Gerald. Thanks for doing this.
Appreciate you.
And joining us now on Tim Graham and Friends, brought to you by CTBK, CPAs and Business Consultants. On the line from Vegas, it's Joel Staniszewski from Sloan, from Buff State. I guess I went out of order. I got to say St. Joe's.
Right.
What are you prouder of, your St. Joe's diploma or your degree from Buff State?
I think the being from Sloan is the biggest one, right?
Yeah, good point. You're right. Being from Sloan,
We're-
but now you're out in Vegas.
we're-
You stop by, you come through Sloan maybe once or twice a year, right? When's the last time you were back because of the pandemic?
Just about a year ago, I was back for Halloween this past year, and I went to what game? Miami. When the Miami game, when Jordan Poyer returned that onside kick for a touchdown. That was when I was here last. Speaking of St. Joe's, my nephew goes to Timon, and so he's like a super sport success alliteration. He goes to Timon, and so my brother and sister-in-law are always posting online like, "Go Timon!" They're playing against, St. Francis and all these other teams. When they said they were going against St. Joe's, I told them I couldn't cheer for them that game. I have my priorities, and it's SJCI reigns supreme over all other high schools.
What sport was this?
This was soccer, but he also plays baseball. He's a really good baseball player, like incredibly good baseball player.
Okay. I was going to say, because
So
some of these sports.
He's avoiding Joe Licata then. Joe Licata is the athletics director, so
Yeah.
small world.
Well, that's what I was wondering. Was
Yeah.
it football? Were we talking about, rooting against former co-host Joe Licata? Although I don't know. I don't know how hard you can cheer for Timon Tigers in some of those matches with St. Joe's in recent years. There's a reason there's an A and a B division in that league.
All right, speaking of A and B divisions, before we talk about Bills and Patriots, what do you make of this Chiefs-Jets line, which opened at 21 and a lot of people are taking the points. They're taking the Jets and the points. It's down to 20, 19, but still an obscene point spread. That game is at Arrowhead Stadium, if anybody really cares. The location, I don't think would matter too much on a fat line like that.
It's crazy. I mean, 3 touchdowns, that's why that number's been bet down. 3 touchdowns is too much. I'm not saying they're not going to lose by more than that, but the Jets that we saw last week against the Bills played pretty well. I mean, yes, the second half they played horribly, or our defense played awesome, depending upon how you want to look at it. But when you saw Joe Flacco under center, he didn't care. I mean, you could tell by watching him for the past couple of years, he's just there for a paycheck. He has just no care in the world to throw the ball, to get rid of it, to try to extend plays. He's just a statue back there. So with Darnold back, they're a live dog. Not saying they're going to win, but 21 points is crazy. This goes back to the Patriots of 2007, where they were 20-plus favorites regularly and covering. So, the reason why that's getting bet so hard is because that's just a huge, huge number to lay. I mean, 3 touchdowns is astronomical to lay.
You mentioned the difference with Joe Flacco and Sam Darnold, and we talked about it. We exchanged some texts during the Bills game last week, and how that line really was a roller coaster. I should say the spread was a roller coaster. The line probably was too.
Yeah.
But it went from 9? It opened up at 11? It went up to 13, maybe 13 and a half in some places. And then by kickoff, it was down to 9 and a half. And a major reason for that was once Darnold was given the go ahead, that he was worth at least a point and a half or 2 on his own.
I'm going to be honest. I do a collection of numbers. I kind of put them all together and average them out to get what I think the spread should be. And then if the spread is above or below, that's how you decide whether or not you want to bet it or not bet it, or bet the other side. And my number that I had for the Bills was 8. And when we talked, I was like, I don't care. Whatever you want, whatever the number is, lay it. And again, foolishly, I go against my better judgment when I look at numbers. And 8 was the number. They're a decent team. I'll say they're decent. Whether they're the worst team in the NFL, there's still only 32 teams. So you're looking at, top athletes, regardless of how bad the team as a whole is. So you're still going to get games where bad teams can still perform like a really good team.
Joel Staniszewski on the line from Vegas with us here, and the pride of Sloan, period. Don't need to roll out any more accreditation there. So, Joel, this week's game against the Patriots, is this a game as a Bills fan that makes it hard for you to handicap because Patriots, the colors, the logo, Tom Brady nightmares, Leotis McKelvin fumbling on the kickoff, whatever you want to put out there, is it hard for you to look only at the numbers when trying to figure out how to bet this one?
Yeah, I mean, how do you look at the history of the Bills and Patriots and think the Bills are a good bet? Of the last 10 games, the Bills have won 1. I believe the last 10 were 3-6-1 against the spread. Average score is 25-15, so we've lost the average game by 10 points. I mean, when you're looking at numbers and you're looking at history and historical data, there's no reason to even think the Bills would play. But we're not talking about Tom Brady of New England. And the team that we're looking at now for New England is nowhere compared to what they were. They still have a great coach. They still have a really good defense. but offensively, they just are nowhere near the team that they were. And even if they were, in weeks 1 and 2 of the season, I mean, they're not even that team anymore.
Joel, as maybe not from the gambling perspective, but from your Bills fan hat, does it mean any less if the Bills get these wins over the Patriots this year? This win in particular, win the division, bury the Patriots, as I've seen written in some places. Does that matter any less because they're not the team that they were? It's not Tom Brady. It's not slaying the dragon, if you will.
I mean, sure. This win will not be as historic as when Fitzpatrick beat him with a last-second field goal. But, I mean, if you go back 20 years before Tom Brady, did the Patriots like beating us after Jim Kelly retired? Probably. Would they have rather beat Jim Kelly and Thurman Thomas and Andre Reed? Of course. I'll take a win any way I can get it. So whether we beat a crappy Jets team by 8 points when we should have beat them by 30, I'll take it. If we beat New England, I'll take it. I don't care if they have backups of backups of backups in there. Yeah, you want to what's the line? To be the best, you got to beat the best. But as a fan and as a betting person, a win is a win. So you take it however you get it.
Joel, and you touched on it there with the records really being moot because those are Tom Brady records. When you take a look at games against the spread, and really what you're looking at there is how odds makers have gotten it right or missed it. Really is the trend. You're not necessarily it's a lot of that is reputation, which it's hard to filter that out of any odds making process. So when you look at this number right now, -3, the Bills are favored. The game is in Orchard Park. I guess the tendency, because the Patriots can keep a game tight, because Bill Belichick is really good at coming up with a game plan for any specific opponent, is the temptation to take the Patriots in the points here.
So, yeah, the line opened at 3. It's been moving up to 3.5. There's even a 4 in town. And as I'd mentioned earlier, when I, take my numbers and I figure out what I think the spread should be, I think it should be a little bit higher. I'm thinking like 4.5, 5. So at 3, I wouldn't lay New England. At 3.5, I wouldn't lay New England, or take New England rather. I love the Bills this week. Well, I say that every week. I like the Bills this week when I look at just the number. If you're looking at team versus team, matchup versus matchup, all things included, you have to take injuries into account. No Edelman, no Harry for New England. Cam Newton not playing like they expected him to, playing more like he did before he left Carolina. I was texting earlier with a director friend of mine, and he said there's no way New England wins this game. He gets a feeling that the effects of him having coronavirus are not completely worn off yet. He said from what he's seen him from the beginning of the season to the end till now is not the same quarterback. He says all the bets that he's taking, a lot of the bets he's taking is Buffalo minus the points, which is why you're seeing that move. You're not going to see a tremendous move because, again, you're still looking at New England versus Buffalo. And all the historical data tells you that New England's going to win this game. But this is not the Bills team that we've seen lose to the Patriots 20 times. And this isn't the Patriots team that has beat us 20 times. So it's a whole new ball game. And it's both whole new teams. The coaching staffs are the same, in New England since forever. But teaching and scheme does a lot, but if you don't have the players to execute that scheme, then you can't beat anybody.
I also I have a tendency to agree with you, Joel, about the COVID angle. I don't think it's being mentioned enough as a possibility. What if Jarrett Stidham starts? What if we learn, maybe we don't find out until an hour and a half before the game, but let's say Bill Belichick decides to start Jarrett Stidham. What would that do?
I would expect the line to go up a little bit in Buffalo's favor, not a ton, half a point at the most. And it's just because you don't know what Stidham can do. I mean, we've seen him come in and throw picks and not be that great, but we haven't seen him in a full game. And until they signed Cam Newton, the Patriots were saying that was their starter. That's who they're going with. And they made no indication that they were unsure of him until they signed Cam Newton. I don't think a change at quarterback really changes the number that drastically. What I think has affected the total is the line moving in the total is the crazy part. It's come down 5 points, opened at 46 and is now down to 41. And that has a lot to do with the weather report, which is supposedly going to be crazy windy and rainy. And that's where we'll see who can scheme up a better game plan here. We know that Josh Allen can throw the ball all over the field, and we assume he can do it in the rain or the wind.
He had trouble against Kansas City in the rain.
Right, but he's still But we're also talking about Kansas City. We're talking about two different teams here. So I would definitely take Josh Allen in a throwing contest in the rain versus either Patriots quarterback. The Patriots are a much better running team. That's because they have to focus on the run and not the pass because they don't have much of a passing offense. So if Buffalo can carry over some of that excitement and that gut check fortitude that they had in the second half of last week to this week, then there's no way the Bills lose this game.
All right.
Stone cold lock. No way the Bills lose outright.
I wouldn't bet a finger on it, but I definitely like it. It's definitely probably the second best bet on the board if I'm looking at the lines. The best bet being Denver Broncos. +3. So 3.5 now.
Oh, you're giving us bonus picks now?
Your bonus pick, take Denver Broncos +3.5.
Back-to-back 1-1 weeks. So maybe this shakes things up a little bit. So you say Bills -3. You say Broncos +3. And do you want to give
half now?
Huh?
You can get 3.5 now.
Okay.
You can get 3.5.
And then Bills. What about the total? You've been going the under anyways, and now with this weather report, I'm assuming you're going to like the under.
That's a big move, though.
41.
41
is not a lot of points.
No, I'm going to take. If I'm betting, I'm taking over 41.
Over 41. Okay.
Is the Bills their red zone issues last week, getting a lot of field goals and no touchdowns? Is that a trend that a bettor might look at, or is that something that you don't want to overreact too much?
The Patriots aren't scoring touchdowns either.
Right. Yeah. That's a huge thing. I mean, you look at the Bills team that couldn't score touchdowns, a New England team that couldn't score touchdowns, and then you factor in the weather. That definitely takes into account why that number dropped so much on the total. I just think it's too low. I mean, we're in a weather regardless and team regardless. This season, there's been, I don't know the number, but I guarantee you that there's been considerably more overs than unders across the league this year.
All right. Joel Staniszewski, Las Vegas handicapper, odds maker, and industry analyst for a long time out there in I stopped myself from saying Sin City. I mean, that's such a what's another? I mean, I should know this.
Sloan City.
Does Vegas have another nickname?
Not that I know of.
I mean, the Meadows, if I want to get all, Spanish translation on you, but.
On the way driving from Las Vegas to California, not that I've done that recently, but there's a exit for Sloan right when you're getting towards California.
Is that anywhere near Zizix?
It is near very, very close to Zizix Road. Yes, very close.
All-time great signs. It's got about 12 Z's in it.
That could be your life story, from Sloan City to Sin City. And you make it big.
I like it. Right.
Joel Staniszewski, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
All right, now back with the full crew here. Jonah Bronstein still with us. Matthew Fairburn is back. And as we wrap up the show here, some great thoughts from Gerald Dixon earlier. And, of course, we just heard from Joel Staniszewski with his breakdown on Patriots at Bills. College football doings. UB was selected by the media that covers the Mid-American Conference to win the division and also to win the entire thing. So, Jonah, as somebody who follows the team as closely as you do, any surprise on that? And I guess just where you think UB's headed this year.
Well, the media poll came out today and put Buffalo as the favorite for both the East Division and the overall Mid-American Conference title. There was a coaches poll yesterday that had UB second in the East and not the favorite to win the overall MAC championship. So there's a little bit of split there among who participates in these polls. I've seen magazines, Athlon, Phil Steele, putting Buffalo as the favorite. They're at least one of the teams that are favored to win this MAC season where there's no non-conference games. It's just 6 MAC games going into the MAC championship game in Detroit in December. And Buffalo is at least one of the favorites to contend to be playing in that game. But if things go well for them, they really could be the best team in the MAC, and this could be one of the best seasons that the team could ever have.
Jonah, what have you heard from players and coaches just about the excitement level to be playing? I mean, when I hear you say that this could be the best UB team ever, for a minute it looked like the MAC wasn't going to play football and this team would never see the light of day. I know it's only a 6-game schedule, but how are they feeling about the fact that they even get to play based on how things were just a couple of months ago?
Well, that's really been the theme that we've heard from especially the players that we've been able to talk to on these Zoom calls, but even Coach Lance Leipold, that they're just happy to be playing, whether it's 6 games, that's the season they're playing, but if it was 6 games, 8 games, 10 games, if there's canceled games and they don't even get to 6, they're just happy to be back out there, even if there's no fans, even if the potential to go to the bowl game isn't the same experience that they've had before. They're not going to be able to play in a big stadium like at Penn State as they have in years past. But just being able to play football, to practice, to prepare for games, to be part of one of these FBS leagues or one of these FBS teams that's playing college football in the fall this year, they're very happy to be on that ship and that they didn't have what, as I mentioned, maybe one of their best teams in school history, and that season didn't evaporate because the MAC wasn't able to play while other leagues were playing.
Jonah, you tweeted this week your thoughts on the quarterback situation. Can you recap it for us here?
Well, it's been a quarterback competition throughout the offseason, even though Kyle Van Treese, I think, is one of the reasons that there's such high expectations for this team is the way they finished last year. 6-2 in their final 8 games, and there were a couple special teams mistakes, missed kicks away from winning all 8 of those games. And all 8 of those games at the end were with Kyle Van Treese starting at quarterback after Matt Myers got injured. Now, Kyle Van Treese had a foot injury, had surgery, and wasn't able to practice in the spring when Matt Myers came back from his surgery and his injury. And so throughout the offseason, until now, Lance Leipold this morning said they're still having a quarterback competition. However, I've heard, and the people that I talk to and really just watching this team and knowing that they've decided to go with Kyle Van Treese as the starting quarterback at least a week ago, and that it's not a competition. But going into that first game, they don't necessarily want to tip their hand to Northern Illinois. Kyle Van Treese and Matt Myers are 2 different quarterbacks stylistically. They want Northern Illinois to have to prepare for both of them. So even though I can say, as the election pollsters say, with a high degree of confidence, I will predict that Kyle Van Treese starts the UB opener. They won't announce that, I believe, until the day of the game. But Kyle Van Treese,
wise move.
He's not the most talented quarterback that UB's had, or he's not one of these stars of the MAC that's going to go on to play in the NFL. But he's a very smart, efficient quarterback that only turned the ball over 3 times in those 8 games. And with Kyle Van Treese playing quarterback, leaning on one of the best running attacks in all of football, Jared Patterson's an All-America candidate at running back, and they have another running back, Kevin Marks, that rushed for 1,000 yards last year. One of the best defenses the program's ever had. His quarterbacking style fits much better with this team to go on a similar run this season as they finished with him under center last season.
All right. That's a pretty well-rounded Tim Graham and friends.
It's like the old radio show when we
we talked about
back and forth.
Raptors in Buffalo. We talked some World Series.
All we need is Bobby to tell us about the vaping flavors, and
that's all. We should get Bobby on the show. We should see if he's allowed to come on the show and tell us about what he's mixing prickly berry with.
We should get him on for some election talk.
There's that too. Here's the thing: the Tim Graham show, or I should say, Tim Graham and Friends, has some really cool friends that are plugged into the election, and I can't have them on because they're so busy. I can have them on at any time. But
after the election, they might not be busy at all.
Ryan Nobles to Susan Milligan to Andrew Yang's campaign advisor, who's from here. There's so many political. He would be essentially CNN's Adam.
Harry Etten.
Huh?
Are you talking about Harry Etten, the CNN?
Yeah, Harry Etten.
Used to be
I was going to say
yep.
Adam Silver. I'm wrong. Silver.
Nate Silver.
Nate Silver.
Right. He used to work at 538 with Nate Silver. Yeah.
Right.
All these guys are the same. They all read the same polls and come up with the same algorithms.
I'm sure they have. I'm sure he has thoughts on Blake Snell too.
They're like Tampa Bay Rays relievers.
All right, we've been on this podcast too long. My thanks to Matthew Fairburn and to Jonah Bronstein and to CTBK. CTBK is a leading accounting firm with a growing team of accountants and business consultants with roots in Amherst, New York. CTBK pairs every project with a focus on a human connection between its team and the client. For assurance, accounting, taxes, litigation support, and advice on acquisitions and mergers, CTBK is available and ready to solve any issue your business faces. For a consultation or to request a quote, call 716-630-2400. Again, that's 716-630-2400. Shampoo Travis Beeson Kirshner, over a quarter century of proven accounting and business excellence for Western New York and beyond. My thanks, of course, to CTBK for making the jump from terrestrial radio to TGAF podcast and remaining our sponsor. So next time we're all together, we'll probably be talking about the Bills in the driver's seat in the AFC East. And as Joel Staniszewski said, I don't think that Tom Brady and Bill Belichick were too busted up that they have their reign of dominance long after Jim Kelly and Dan Marino were out of the division. So I don't think the Bills should feel guilty if they stomp on the Patriots and win a division this year.
He also said stone cold lock. Best bet. Guaranteed Bills victory.
On the money line, though, right?
Right. Yeah.
That was on the money line. But then, so you know what? I should add that to the wager. I should say Bills on money line as I keep track of Joel's bets on the year. He's still up. He's been spinning his wheels 2 weeks in a row, but still has made you money this year if you've been listening to him. Okay, guys. Thanks.